And welcome to Wrestling at Random. I'm Jeremy Deemer.
And I am Adam Summers, and you are in season 4 of Wrestling at Random for what has to be, Jeremy, I would say one of the 2 or 3 most modern shows we've reviewed, particularly in terms of pay-per-view events. I know we've had some 2011 and 2012 TV shows, but this is the 2011 edition of the TLC pay-per-view event from WWE.
It's also our first Tables, Ladders, and Chairs pay-per-view that we've reviewed as well. The TLC from 2011. The date on this is December 18th of 2011. And before we get into the show, let's kind of set the tone about WWE in 2011. This show is about 2 guys. It's about CM Punk. We'll talk about him in great detail in the main event. And it's about Daniel Bryan, also known as Bryan Danielson. Daniel Bryan here getting we'll get into a little more detail on how his situation came to be later, but to be clear, this is Daniel Bryan before the Yes Movement, before his big run on top that was one of the few real organic WWE moments that you can point to, is his rise to become a main event star and main event WrestleMania 30. That was a totally fan driven organic experience. This is a few years prior to that here in 2011.
Well, it is. It's also noteworthy, though, in that there was an organic, fan-driven response to Daniel Bryan immediately in WWE in the NXT competition. Not the NXT that everyone knows now, but the obstacle course type of NXT that we did a review of one episode on a previous season. But they did not want to go with what the fans wanted and tried to make him look like an idiot, much like they did week in and week out with Low-Ki as the Caval character in NXT at that time. So the fans were with him. They were with the idea of it. We'll see that later on here in the show, but they, as a company, they were having none of it, and it would take something as gigantic as you mentioned, the Yes Movement to finally move the needle enough for them to pull the trigger in a more meaningful way than we see later on in the show.
Yeah, and we'll get into a little bit more detail about Bryan Danielson, Daniel Bryan, later in this podcast as well. But I just wanted to kind of set the stage a little bit about these 2 guys. Dave Meltzer, the Wrestling Observer newsletter, writes that Punk and Bryan both garnered stardom as 2 of the big 3 with Samoa Joe years back in the early days of Ring of Honor. At the time, people said all 3 would never make it. Joe didn't have the look or physique. Punk wasn't big and didn't have a major league physique. And because Bryan was short and didn't have a look, even with a good physique, none were even considered to be WWE prospects.
Which was insane if you were going to shows around that time, Ring of Honor shows like you and I were, IWA Mid-South shows like I was going to every month in Highland, Indiana, and you would see these guys, and it was so obvious that they were the best wrestlers in the world at what they did at that time, but that was not. I mean, we've talked about before during podcasts from this era of WWE what they were looking for. They were looking for assembly line clones of Randy Orton. It was Ted DiBiase Jr. It was a young Cody Rhodes. It was a dozen other guys that all looked that way. And these 3 guys, for all the talent they had, they did not have those attributes, and so they were not slotted in a way that you would expect them to ever get the opportunities they got later on.
Samoa Joe went to TNA and had strong initial success there. Punk was signed by WWE, and he languished in developmental for a long time. He was only brought up because Paul Heyman, who was booking developmental and used Punk as one of his top stars in OVW, Ohio Valley Wrestling, he got booking power over the new ECW WWE show and pushed for him to be brought in. And still, when Heyman tried to make him ECW champion, the idea was shunned, and it was part of a series of wheels in motion that led to Heyman's departure from the company. See our December to Dismember pay-per-view review, where we talk
Yes.
about that in a lot more detail.
Yes, that's the, I don't say logical endpoint, because nothing about that whole scenario was logical, but it was the only way that whole disaster of an experiment could end, and that's exactly how it ended.
But you remember how much people wanted him to win that elimination chamber, and he was
Yes.
out first.
Yes, the only people in that match that the fans cared about were Rob Van Dam and CM Punk, and Punk went out first. I believe Van Dam went out second.
Yep.
You know, we were left with the likes of Big Show and Bobby Lashley and guys like that. So yeah, it was another example of somebody getting over in an organic fashion in WWE, this time being CM Punk. And because it wasn't what they, meaning the company, wanted, they were absolutely bound and determined to make sure it didn't happen.
Yeah, but what Punk had going for him was he was an excellent promo. He got his first world title as a fluke based on winning the Money in the Bank match and cashing that in. But with the title, he actually did better with it than expected. Punk had his ups and downs over the next few years, working anywhere from the low card to the main events until his promo and angle in the summer of 2011. So earlier in the year that we're reviewing this show, this is December TLC pay-per-view. The angle that he did in the summer of 2011, and he proceeded to have two wins over John Cena that solidified him as a main event champion level performer.
Including one of those matches, didn't we review on this podcast, or was that later on? That was the one in Chicago.
That's the one in Chicago. Yeah, so you can hear us. I believe that's in the bonus content.
It is. I believe that was a single match choice for us to review. Talk about insane crowd reactions, one of the all-timers, at least in the modern era.
100%. He was the main event of this show, and we will talk about that match, like I mentioned, in detail later on. This show comes to us from Baltimore, Maryland, in front of 8,000 fans. Jerry the King Lawler and Michael Cole are your announcers.
Oh boy, and we'll get to that later. If you think you know what the face-heel dynamic will be among announcers with Michael Cole and Jerry Lawler on the call of this show, I will guarantee that you are wrong unless you were watching very, very closely for 2011 WWE. One note just on the building. It's interesting that this is not a major NBA, NHL type of arena, 15, 16, 20,000. This is a more mid-sized building, kind of akin to what you would see in modern AEW, the type of buildings they run so often. I like the visual of it, though, because it looks different. It doesn't look like a cookie cutter major arena. It's kind of boxy. There's weird sections in the upper deck of like 4 rows, and then another's got 8 rows. Like it has some character, which you don't always get from a WWE broadcast.
No, but it still felt like a big show. They still had all the spotlights everywhere and the big production that you expect from a WWE show.
And it's jam-packed. Even if it's a mid-sized arena, it's jam-packed to where, it doesn't feel small. They do a great job lighting it and all the bells and whistles, like you said.
Vicky Guerrero comes out to open the show. She's screaming, "Excuse me," and "Merry Christmas, everyone." She introduces the U.S. champion Dolph Ziggler.
The show-off Dolph Ziggler.
The U.S. championship is on the line as it's Dolph Ziggler defending his title against the challenger, Zack Ryder, also known as Matt Cardona. But Zack Ryder here comes out to his horrible theme song.
Woo, woo, woo. You know it.
Oh, radio, tell me everything you know.
I like to sing with the radio. I like to play it real loud.
Oh my God, that was one of the first notes I have, is that we talked about earlier guys that got over organically, and then the company did everything they could to sabotage them because it's not who they wanted to get over. This music is the biggest example of that with Zack Ryder. He's this underdog, babyface, high energy dude that's gotten over with the fans, and he has this like 80s late night Cinemax sort of music. It's just bizarre. It does not fit him at all. And it could have only been chosen to sabotage him. No one would pick that music thinking this goes with this guy or this will help him at all.
No, and you want to talk about, he's a guy who fits that bill of the Randy Orton, the Ted DiBiase Jr. He fits the bill, but he got over in a way that the WWE didn't approve of.
Exactly.
They didn't approve of his YouTube show where he got a cult following. They didn't. They didn't
was
approve
outside
of that.
of their tightly scripted reality, the tightly scripted world that guys either the box they have to get over in. He went outside of that box and got over, but it's so ridiculous because, like you said, he had everything that their factory of guys that they would want, but still, it wasn't enough.
No, you didn't do it their way, and they weren't going to let you do it. And in fact, you're going to hear Vince McMahon's opinions through the mouth of Michael Cole here. We'll talk about some of this commentary as we go through it. The people, though, when we say Zack Ryder got himself over with his YouTube show, this is no joke. I mean, the people are chanting for Zack Ryder. They're into him big time.
In an era where mid-card and low-card guys are not over at all in the WWE. People are there to see the stars, like the top few stars. They're not there to see U.S. title matches. They're not there to see cruiserweight title matches. They're not there to see non-superstars, and he is beloved even in that environment.
And he starts out hot with a somersault dive over the top to the floor, and Michael Cole is incessantly calling Ryder a, quote, flash in the pan.
He calls him a flash in the pan. He says the Ryder revolution will be over. He calls him a goof. He says Ziggler is putting on a clinic, and all these goofs in the crowd can do is chant Ryder. He also says that Ryder has accomplished nothing this year. He makes fun of Zack Ryder for being a lifelong WWE fan. He calls the fans idiots. This is Michael Cole, the play-by-play guy who is supposed to be the trusted voice that guides you through the show, the guy that has credibility. How many times have we talked about that on all these territory shows, all the way up through modern day wrestling? But here, your play-by-play guy is just this detestable heel. It's so weird. There's a reason this isn't done, because it sabotages everything you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, Cole tells us Ryder's a lifelong fan living his dream, but he couldn't get it done in the ring, so he started a social media campaign. He made himself and these goofs, the Lemmings, bought into this campaign. They made Ryder something he isn't. I'm like, Jesus, they are so mad about this YouTube show. Ryder hits the running boot in the corner. Vicky puts Ziggler's foot on the bottom rope to break up the pin. We get the great crowd going nuts for this opener, and Ryder's able to kick out of the Famouser. He goes to the top and hits a Frankensteiner off the top, and the people wanted that to be the finish.
Oh, yeah. They wanted it to be the finish. Anytime Zack Ryder got offense, they were ready for him to win. They were ready for it to be the finish. We've got a lot of woo-woo-woos. We've got broski boots in the corner. We've got Michael Cole yelling, come on. What does he say? It was something completely ridiculous, like a temper tantrum. Come on, throw a temper tantrum, you little jerk. After Ryder doesn't get the 3 count. And we should be clear. this is not the only time during this time period where Michael Cole is acting heelish. We'll see it on this show. My recollection is that they experimented with this on Raw or SmackDown, for whichever show he was on, for a few months, but it was never more pronounced and more targeted and vicious than it was here at Zack Ryder.
Ryder hits the Rough Rider, which is his leg lariat, gets the pin. He's the new U.S. champion, and the people are thrilled. They said what they felt, but good for them for pulling the trigger on this and actually giving him the U.S. title.
Well, what it felt like to me was they had to put the belt on him because he was so over, but they are completely convinced to make sure that no one outside of the people in that building thought that he deserved the belt or thought that he was worthy of the U.S. title. Like that was even, a thing that mattered in the company at this point. I just laugh when his music hits. Again, it's even more ridiculous. Here is this triumphant babyface celebrating near his hometown with his dad and his family in the crowd, right? And this music is playing. Just so ridiculous.
Could you imagine if they were actually trying to make this a moment? It could have actually been a moment, but instead Michael Cole is crapping on the whole thing instead of steering into it.
Actively sabotaging what should be a great organic moment in the undercard, which never happened in this era of WWE. But like you said, he got over in a way that they didn't approve of, and so we had to have those very clearly Vince McMahon fed lines just throughout this match, doing their best to sabotage this whole deal.
In the back, Cody Rhodes jumps Booker T.
Did he? I couldn't tell because the camera was shaking so violently I had to look away from the screen. We've talked about the progression of when WWE really started in earnest with the shaky cam and the zoom in and out and all that garbage. I don't know when it started, but they were leaning into it heavily here. This was unwatchable.
WWE Tag Team Championship. The champions, Air Boom.
Air Boom. The worst name of any push tag team in modern major professional wrestling history. It is Air Boom. The team of Evan Bourne, who we all know as Matt Sydal. I guess he's Air. And Kofi Kingston is Boom because he slaps his hands together and the crowd chants boom. That's right. Air Boom.
Their opponents, the challengers, Primo and Epico. The Colognes are here with Rosa Mendez.
Again, these are all talented professional wrestlers to greater or lesser degrees in this match. But what we talked about earlier about mid-card and undercard stuff not being over, man, this is another example of how WWE largely has never cared about tag team wrestling. None of these guys are presented as stars. These tag team title belts look like oversized pennies attached to straps of leather. What are these belts? They're horrible.
I have that written down here as well. These belts were known as the copper penny belts, and they are lame. It
doesn't even do justice to how bad these are.
No, it's like they wanted to take the IWGP tag team titles and make them lame.
Yes.
That's what they wanted to do.
Yes.
It's a really weird looking belt. Kofi with a great hot tag. He ran wild. Bourne with a top rope dive to the floor. Kofi hits the Trouble in Paradise, and Air Boom are still your tag team champs. The poor Colognes were an afterthought, as basically they were just trying to make Rosa Mendez the star of that act and completely ignoring both Primo and Epico. They lose. Air Boom, still your tag champs. Horrible name. Nothing match.
Yeah, the match was fine. Primo and Epico, again, like they're fine, but there's nothing to them. They didn't try to make them any more than they were. I thought Kingston looked good. I thought Evan Bourne, Matt Sydal looked fantastic. It's easy to forget before the pot bust and then the synthetic pot bust that led to him being out of the company, which that looks so ridiculous now in hindsight. That dude was awesome in WWE. Like the rare guy that got brought in from the indies that all they did was change his name from Matt Sydal to Evan Bourne, but otherwise he just got to be the same guy. He stood out so much in the company at that point because nobody else really did that style. And he was, for an undercard guy, he had kind of got himself a nice spot before everything fell apart for him.
Tough Enough Josh Matthews is in the back, and he says that Booker is in the trainer's room getting evaluated after the Cody Rhodes attack. And he says, you can assume the match is off, but that's not official. Then
This
why
whole
would I
situation
assume this,
confused
Josh?
me.
Why am I assuming that this match is just off, Josh, when you haven't gotten the official word yet?
It will be less clear as the night goes on, which is an accomplishment. As they delve into the story further, it gets more opaque.
Teddy Long is in his office dressed as Santa. He's dancing to his theme song, which I could watch all the time. And then Hornswoggle interrupts. Teddy speaks to him like a child. He gives him a gift, Rosetta Stone Ebonics.
This
Yikes.
is horrible. How was this? Did this happen only 11 years ago? Just the whole thing is so bad. We've seen terrible Hornswoggle segments earlier. That Christmas gift thing with DX from that episode of Raw or SmackDown a while back. It's just dumb comedy. He says that he has mature testes. He says something about, when has Santa been black? Then Teddy says no fat jolly white man would come down his chimney. Then he gives, for some reason, Hornswoggle a book, Rosetta Stone Ebonics. I am so embarrassed that I am even watching this, and this falls firmly in the column of that we've talked about other things before of, if you're in a relationship and your significant other walks in while you're watching this, you will no longer be in a relationship after. This is the end.
But this is always the segment that they walk in on, is like the ones where you're like, oh no, it's not this bad.
Always. Just like as a kid watching ECW pay-per-views, like my mom never walked down to the basement during like Tajiri and Super Crazy or Jerry Lynn and Lance Storm. She would walk down the basement when there'd be like a Francine Dawn Marie cat fight. Like,
sure.
Without fail.
The extra cringe is the forced laughter by King and Cole. Oh, it is unbearable. Fingernails on the chalkboard. Unbearable.
Same thing in my notes. I have, we get all caps, forced laughter from the announcers. And yes, it is as bad as you would think. We then go from there, talk about a change of pace to a tables match, because again, this is the Tables, Ladders, and Chairs pay-per-view, TLC. And this is the era in wrestling where you don't do stipulation matches because there's a blood feud that's reached a boiling point, and now they have to settle it in the confines of a steel cage or the tables match or a ladder match or something involving chairs. It's just because it's that date on the calendar. So that's why you do those stipulation matches.
What was great was the tones of Lillian Garcia doing the ring announcing. I'm like, wow, she is so much better than Justin Roberts, who's the SmackDown, or she's the SmackDown announcer. Justin Roberts is the Raw announcer. He's terrible. She's great. And it's like, you hear her and you're like, how do we give the mic back to Justin Roberts? She does such a great job here. The tables match is Randy Orton versus Wade Barrett. And here's another guy, Barrett, with another horrible song. 2011 might be the worst year for mid-card theme songs. These were all terrible.
I have that almost word for word in my notes, how awful this is. And yeah, it's like if you weren't at a certain level on the card, you were all going to get like the same, like early 2010s trying to sound like early 2000s, but slightly less aggressive rock music. It's terrible. It's whiny. It doesn't fit Wade Barrett at all.
No.
I will just have to say up front, I'm not as high on Wade Barrett as some people are. Like, I hear people say that like Wade Barrett is one of the great misses in WWE history, and this guy should have been a top guy in the company for 15 years. Like, he was a decent talker, but he is an absolute zero in the ring. Like, his attribute is tall. That's it.
Yeah, for this match, there was a unique thing in this match that I liked. Barrett would flip over tables whenever he was near him, so he couldn't
Yes.
get put through him in the match. I thought that was a good strategy. So playing
Yes,
defense.
because the rules for this match, the only way you can win is by putting your opponent through one table. And there are plenty of opportunities because there are at least 40 tables, and that's not an exaggeration, scattered around ringside, the entranceway, and all points in between.
Orton put a table in the ring. Barrett comes off the second turnbuckle, and Orton turns it into an RKO in midair, putting Barrett through the table for the victory.
Yeah, this was fine. It wasn't great by any stretch. Again,
No, it was fine.
It existed, which honestly, that's 95% of all Randy Orton matches. And Wade Barrett's not going to bring anything to the table that's going to bring something different out of him. My favorite Michael Cole moment during this match is he's wondering aloud whether Wade Barrett's bare knuckle championship fighting experience will help in this tables match. And there's this awkward pause. And then Jerry Lawler just says, I don't think so. And it just broke me because why would bare knuckle fighting experience have anything to do with a tables match? Again, the match was nothing. The finish was awesome, as most out of nowhere RKO finishes are. I also enjoyed Wade Barrett hitting a nice boss man slam. That was really the only thing he brought to the table for me in this match.
Teddy Long in the back gives the Bellas his number for Christmas. They were not impressed.
This was
the segment that he's the general manager, which means this is very explicit sexual harassment.
Oh, 100%. This is the segment where if your boyfriend or girlfriend or wife or whoever that's not a wrestling fan at all walked into the room, let's say they missed the earlier one with Hornswoggle, but they happened to walk in during this one, it's done. You got to find somebody new. They're not going to stick with you after this. This was awful.
Jack Swagger comes in, also known as Jake Hager. Here he's Jack Swagger, and he wants to know what he's going to do about Mark Henry hitting him with a chair on SmackDown. Sheamus comes in. They get into an argument. Swagger versus Sheamus tonight.
Yes, we are told this is an early Christmas present. Jack Swagger versus Sheamus. I must not have been good this year if this is Pro Wrestling Cole. And I don't mean Michael.
I was going to say, like, we had plenty of Pro Wrestling Cole throughout this whole entire event. WWE Divas Champion Beth Phoenix defends the championship against the challenger, Kelly Kelly. I'm watching Beth Phoenix, and this sucked. But Beth Phoenix is one of those women who I would have loved to have seen how good she could have been in a different era with other women to work with. You could see, like, she with who she had to work with here, you really could never tell.
Well, she got about as good as she could get. Like,
what her ceiling could have been, right?
Exactly. Well, it's something you think about on the flip side of it that I always talk about on the Big Audio Nightmare, the promotion like Stardom, where if you have any capability of becoming a good or even great wrestler, it will get drawn out of you because you are wrestling 3, 4, 5 times a week against the best wrestlers in the world, and you are only going to get better. Here, this era of WWE for women's wrestling is the exact opposite. Like, there is no chance of reaching whatever your potential ceiling is. And she was, by the standards of what women's wrestling was in WWE in 2011, she was great. But, there's no way to know what she could have been, because by the time that had happened, she was largely done. And then she came back. Obviously, you're not necessarily going to be the same. That development didn't take place. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to see, like, how much of a badass power wrestler she could have been in an era with the likes of Bayley and Sasha Banks and Charlotte Flair and Becky and everybody like that.
Kelly was screaming too much. She was annoying. Beth picks her up for a power bomb, but keeps sending her, she picks her up for a power bomb, but just keeps rotating over, sends her down face first, and Beth gets the pin. Still Divas champion.
Yeah, this was just largely a nothing match. We then go backstage, something with Alberto Del Rio and his ring announcer. What's his name? Is it Ricardo?
Ricardo Rodriguez.
Ricardo
Yes.
Rodriguez, who I enjoyed as a character. I thought he was pretty funny
I
here.
love the act. I love Alberto Del Rio with a personal ring announcer who's better than the actual ring announcer.
Yes.
And he's great. Like I like the rich Mexican socialite angle here. This is great. He's joined by the Miz, less great. In the Miz, they talk about how their alliance is dead. When the bell rings, they're not going to work together. It's every man for himself in the main event.
Yeah, they had an
Miz,
alliance to weaken CM Punk, culminating in the Raw before this, where they beat him down. There was a ladder involved, but now they are not going to work together because it's every man for themselves.
Miz shoves a plate of food into Ricardo's face. Ricardo will be out later with that food still on his tux. Booker T comes out. So Josh
The highlight
was
of the
wrong.
show.
Josh is
Booker
wrong
T.
as predicted. Yes.
Well, we'll see. The highlight of the show, though, Booker T doesn't just come out. He comes out to his Harlem Heat WCW music, the longest running final vestige of WCW in WWE is that Harlem Heat Booker T music. It is the
Mount Rushmore. It's on the Mount Rushmore of theme songs.
100%. I told you, I think when we were walking into the, I think it was the All Out AEW show this year. I think I texted you. It was so great. I'm walking through the parking lot. There's some guy tailgating, and it's like I'm walking, and as I walk by, the Booker T Harlem Heat music starts blaring from the guy's car, and like I feel like I'm Booker T making an entrance. It put me in such a good mood for that show.
Cody Rhodes attacks Booker during Booker's entrance. They end up having to take Booker T back to the trainer again.
This is so weird, though, because all of these Booker T beatdowns, like they can't do the match each time, but he looks fine. He's not really selling it. He's not that glassy-eyed. Like it almost reminded me of what you would expect from TNA Booker T, where you know he's just amusing himself and he really doesn't care. And I hate to say that because I love Booker T, one of my all-time favorites from that era, from the 90s into the 2000s. But this, I don't know, this whole thing didn't really land with me.
We get a Triple H and Kevin Nash video package. Nash apparently injured Triple H with a sledgehammer shot to the back. Triple H was out for 7 weeks.
Which I give them credit for, because in the modern era of wrestling, to do an injury angle and actually sell it for 7 weeks, you don't see that. So I give them credit for doing that. I guess the story here was that like Triple H finally gave Nash a job, but then he fired him. And so Nash turned on him. The best part about this video feature, the most amusing thing about it to me, is that like they're talking about the 20 years of history between these guys, but almost none of that 20 years of history actually happened in front of the cameras. It's almost all behind the scenes stuff. So like they're talking about the 20-year history of these guys, but then they're just showing them like hugging backstage during the 5 minutes that there was an NWO in the WWE. It's just a really weird vibe.
Another weird vibe is this is a ladder match featuring Kevin Nash against Triple H.
Yes, I had the same reaction. And it's a ladder match, but it's the rarest of rare ladder matches in that it does not end when you climb the ladder and grab the item that's hanging above the ring. You then can use that item, that being the sledgehammer, to bludgeon your opponent.
Right. So I wanted clarification on the rules. Did not get it. We are just told that if you climb the ladder and retrieve the sledgehammer, you can use it. But then they don't tell us how you actually win the match. Is it pin or submission? Or I don't know what happens here, but we'll figure it out as we go. They fight outside for the entire first part of this match. This match is all about smoke and mirrors.
Kevin Nash comes out to his NWO music, to the NWO theme song, without the like and New World Order drops, and it is so weird and like almost uncanny valley video game like to have Kevin Nash with his like deep jet black dyed goatee that looks so unnatural walking out in 2011 to the NWO music in WWE. So weird.
Yeah, and to no reaction. Like he
None.
was not over at all coming out.
Which it tells you so much about this show and about this era of professional wrestling. Like we'll get to it when it's the end of the show. To me, so much of this just felt like the natural conclusion of what a wrestling monopoly does to the product, to the fans, to everything. But this is 2011. We're not like 30 years removed from Kevin Nash being a thing. I mean, we're 12, 13 years removed from the height of the NWO. We're less than 10 years removed from him being in WWE regularly. But here, nobody cares. Like he gets like a Primo and Epico level reaction.
Yeah. Well, and it's crazy because this is December. He came back in January of 2011 as a surprise entrant as Diesel in the Royal Rumble. And
That's
he
right.
got such a big reaction coming out as Diesel in the Royal Rumble that they signed him and they brought him in. And so to see over the course of this year him go from that nostalgia reaction to how much legs nostalgia actually has by December and no reaction.
Yeah.
And this is his final match here in WWE. And yeah, this was not good.
No, and they kind of, but yeah, nostalgia does have a short shelf life, but they also cut the legs out from under it. Like he was brought back as Diesel as a surprise, and then really the rest of the year, it's all him as Kevin Nash, as like a Triple H lackey or feuding with Triple H. And he's not presented
he was
as a
gonna do
star.
a Punk run. No, he was gonna do a run with Punk, and then it just wasn't getting over, and they moved it to Triple H. So
well, but they presented him instead of as a star, he was presented as like this down on his luck, can't get a job ex-wrestler who needed a handout from Triple H. And okay, maybe that's an effective plot point in whatever story they're eventually telling with Triple H. But it sabotaged him being a star. Like he needed all the help he could get in 2011, looking like a star to modern wrestling fans, and they didn't give him any help whatsoever.
Nash gave Triple H a side slam on a ladder. He brought a table into the ring. They're both on the ladder together. Triple H hits Nash with the sledgehammer in the head while it's still hanging over the ladder. Nash falls, goes through the table in the ring. Triple H takes the sledgehammer down. The match continues, so it must be pin or submission. Triple H hits Nash with the sledgehammer, which is the dumbest weapon. Like, you hit a guy with a sledgehammer in the head, like a guy dies, like, or at least is like mangled. Like,
100% my thought with this weapon as well. Well, it's in pro wrestling, you cannot use weapons that are so legitimately dangerous that you have to hit a guy in a way that it looks like you're not hitting him at all, because otherwise you would kill him.
And if you're gonna do it, you can only do like a stomach shot or a back shot.
Yes,
and
like what
if
chair
you do a
shots
back
were on
shot,
this show.
Out 7 weeks. But when you do a headshot with it, looks completely ridiculous and insane.
Yeah, it's like bringing a sword into the ring like we've seen, or the gun stuff with Pillman and Austin. Like, it's so over the top and it's so violent that you can't actually buy it, because you know there's no way it would ever actually get used, to the degree that it would be. We didn't talk a lot about moves that happened in this match, and that's because almost nothing happened in this match. It was punch, kick, move, sell for at least a minute, rinse, repeat.
This match was so long too. It was so long. And
how long was it? Do you have the match length in front of you? I can pull it up, because it felt like it was a half an hour.
Yeah, it had to be at least it felt like 30, but it had to be probably between 18 and 22.
I was gonna say there's no way it was less than 18 minutes.
Yeah, it was probably 18 to 22.
Well, and here we go. It was 18 minutes and 18 seconds.
Okay.
That felt like 30,
30,
and it was maybe 8 minutes of match at most, stretched out into that time. by far the most entertaining thing for me in this match was Nash snake eyes Triple H on the barricade on the floor, and then a guy starts chanting over and over again, Vinny Vegas, clap, 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 clap. And he's the only guy doing it, but I felt it. I loved it. That made this match a little bit more bearable for me.
Triple H hit a pedigree. Nash gives the too sweet, but Triple H with a crotch chop hits Nash in the head with a sledgehammer, gets the pin. Nash gets stretchered out. And again, that was his farewell to this WWE run. So keeping track of logic now, you can use a table in a ladder match. Can you use a ladder or tables in a chairs match? We'll find out later.
We will find out later. The rules are not as simple as they should be throughout this show. This was the right time, in summary, for Kevin Nash to make his exit from WWE. There were points toward the end of this match where he legitimately looked like he was about to expire in the ring. It was time.
WWE Champion CM Punk cuts a promo with Matt Stryker. John Laurinaitis interrupts, says, I mailed your Superstar of the Year Slammy Award to you. He says, good luck. And Punk says, luck is for losers.
Can I go back just to the end again? I have to mention this. The Triple H Nash match. Maybe I, as the lifelong...
I'm trying to move on from it, but no, go ahead.
as the lifelong WCW fan, maybe I'm a bit too emotionally attached to everything that went on post WCW death. But we know even, what was it, 2015 with Triple H and Sting, how they had to prove that WWF beat WCW in the Monday Night War.
They literally made that happen again.
It's the whole match in 2015. Well, here, if you pay close attention, the finish, Kevin Nash is on his knees. He reaches up to do the NWO 2 sweet. Triple H does the DX crotch chop, hits him in the head with a sledgehammer, and pins him. This felt to me like one more burial of WCW, one more victory for no reason, because you owned the company and you buried it already, but one more victory for the WWE over WCW. Drove me crazy.
Jack Swagger with Vicky Guerrero taking on Sheamus.
Who also has horrible music. Sheamus, horrible. Again, mid-card music hell for Sheamus. I expected some like bagpipes or something Scottish sounding. It's just this horrible early 2000s nondescript whiny boy rock.
No, whenever I hear it, I'm like, did they say too many limes?
You wear your sin like it's some kind of prize. Too many lies, too many lies.
Is it? What is he saying? So, Sheamus wins with a bro kick. Nothing match here.
We do find out from Michael Cole in a line that would be repeated over and over and over on WWE television about everybody. He says, Sheamus just likes to have fun.
Ugh. Chairs match for the World Heavyweight Championship. The challenger is the Big Show. Challenging
what is a chairs match?
Chairs are legal. You can use chairs in the chairs match.
But yes, I get that. But what is the lineage of a chairs match? Like the whole idea of like a tables, ladders, and chairs show is you've got these stipulation matches that have a history behind them.
Yep.
You would never have just a chairs match.
No, it's only because they called it tables, ladders, and chairs match, and then they deconstructed it, and that's the only reason a chairs match exists.
The only reason this happens is because you are having a tables match, and you are having a ladder match, and the pay-per-view is called Tables, Ladders, and Chairs. So by deduction, you must have a chairs match. It's so dumb.
No more sexual chocolate, Mark Henry. This is the world's strongest man, Mark Henry. But holy cow, you want to talk about a guy who's on the opposite end and having nothing but great theme songs. We talked about how great the sexual chocolate song was. This is another great song for Mark Henry.
Step up, bring it.
This is when Mark Henry was a star. You can make the argument this was, I don't think there's even really much argument. This is the best era of Mark Henry, the Hall of Pain era. Do you remember also that tearful angle that he did where he faked retiring?
Retiring? Oh my God, it was so good.
One of the best. It has to be in modern, and I say modern, like the last 20 years, like post death of WCW, WWE Monopoly. It has to be one of the best WWE angles of the modern era. So well done.
The match starts with Big Show just throwing a bunch of chairs into the ring, and it's easy to overlook how impressive it is on how easily he can just throw steel chairs. Super impressive.
Well, because it's not just one, it's not just two, it's not just three, it's not just 13 or 14. It has to be 20 chairs as he slowly walks around the ring and he's whipping them like you or I would throw like a paper airplane.
Henry works over Big Show's hand, throwing the hand into the stairs. It's injured now. He can't do a choke slam or the knockout punch. Henry charges at him with a chair. The Big Show is able to hit the knockout punch and gets the pin. I was like, wow, that was quick. We have a new world heavyweight champion. It's the Big Show.
5 minutes and 30 seconds. I wasn't expecting this to go 20, but I did not think this would be the finish. I thought for sure he'd throw the punch, hurt his hand, have to wait a few seconds to go for the cover. Mark Henry would kick out. Like as it stood, this felt like such an underwhelming world title match.
I'll tell you why it was short in a second here. After the match, Henry attacks Show with a chair, DDTs the Big Show on a chair. Big Show is knocked out. And we hear Daniel Bryan's music hit. He comes running down with referee Scott Armstrong, as we are a Scott Armstrong podcast.
Yes. Do you think
former party boy?
I was going to say, is Daniel Bryan an honorary party boy? Considering these two men ran down the ring together with such vigor, I feel like Johnny and Davey Rich may have been jealous of this newfound friendship.
If you don't know what we're talking about, it's last week's episode. You skipped last week's episode. Go back and listen to NWA USA Championship Wrestling. So he comes down with the referee, and he's got his Money in the Bank briefcase with him. He can cash in the briefcase for a title match wherever, whenever, and the champ is currently knocked out. So he turns in the briefcase, makes the cover, gets the 3 count. The new World Heavyweight Champion is Daniel Bryan. He gets on the announce table. He yells at Michael Cole. He is all of us right now yelling at Michael Cole.
Yes.
And he's saying that this is for those who supported him for the last 12 years. This is for you.
It's like a couple things. Happy to see Bryan Danielson win the world title. The big gold belt, not quite as big, looks a little jaundiced. There's one point where he's holding up the championship belt, and you see directly behind him a fan holding up a replica of the world heavyweight title big gold belt, and that replica looks so much better than this version of that title. Secondly, again, love seeing him with the belt, but it's just such a fundamental misunderstanding, and probably intentionally so, of who and what Bryan Danielson is as a professional wrestler, that he wins his big world title coming down to the ring, cashing in the Money in the Bank briefcase on a knocked out opponent, doesn't hit a move, goes for the pin, and wins like a total coward.
I told you we'd talk about Daniel Bryan in WWE like I did CM Punk, and now's the time to do it as he just won the world title here. Dave Meltzer, Wrestling Observer Newsletter. Daniel Bryan got to WWE and was also sent to developmental like CM Punk, where he stood out above everyone there. He was introduced on the NXT show, the obstacle course version of NXT. He immediately made both good and bad impressions. The wrestlers, for the most part, all liked him. The fans saw him as the star of the first season of this show. But Vince McMahon didn't see a star in him and kept saying that there was no money in Daniel Bryan.
Wow.
They booked him to lose almost every match because they wanted to do a legitimate contest for NXT of legitimate voting. The reason he was pulled from NXT and eliminated early was because the voting was legitimate and there was a fear in a real poll that he would get the points to win, and he wasn't seen as having the potential to be a star like the others in that class, like Wade Barrett and David Otunga.
Imagine like losing the plot so much on what professional wrestling is that first you create an obstacle course style show to create a new professional wrestling star. You actually do create a star somehow on that show. The fans vote and tell you this is the man that we see as the star. You are so upset that this guy got over in this ridiculous concept that you put together that you then completely sabotage it to the point of saying we have to get rid of him because the fans will vote him to win. Isn't that the point?
No, because Wade Barrett or David Otunga were the guys that they were targeting to win.
No greater encapsulation of what WWE was in 2011 than everything you just said.
Bryan was very well liked. The agents loved him. The wrestlers respected him and wanted to work with him and put him over and wanted him to look good. And he was praised by everyone for his work ethic. The idea was Bryan would wind up as a player because talent eventually makes it, but would probably struggle and have to overcome a lot of perceptions and adversity before he got there. But once he got there, he'd stay at that level. But then he did get there at SummerSlam a few years ago, and in the WWE stop and start push category, he was just one of a dozen Kofi Kingstons, as Dave Meltzer puts it. Vince's idea was that the only way that Bryan could get over is as a nerdy character who eventually, like in Revenge of the Nerds, on occasion, he gets his big triumphs and sticks it in the oppressive bully's face. That's the only way that Vince would do a Daniel Bryan story.
Kind of like in a different way, Vince McMahon somehow saw AJ Styles when he brought him in as, I think they call him like the pit bull or something. His this scrappy, tiny underdog when he was the same size as everyone in the company and he's just a great wrestler. There is just, you were not allowed, your character could not be, I'm a better wrestler than everyone and I win wrestling matches. That was just anathema to the type of product they produced.
So Mark Henry was working this match with a torn groin. So that's why this match was kept so short.
I'm glad I didn't talk extensively about my notes, talking about how slow this match was. I would feel terrible if I had mentioned that.
They after the injury on Raw, they immediately decided to take the title off him. Bryan was always going to get the title by cashing in the Money in the Bank briefcase. The plan was at WrestleMania at first, but then it changed to Elimination Chamber, and then it changed again to this show with the Mark Henry injury. So Bryan wins the title here. He would go to WrestleMania to defend against Sheamus and lose in 18 seconds to Sheamus, which was something designed to get Sheamus over as a champion, but it completely backfired. And the people made Daniel Bryan into the star that he would become because of that ultimate decision and result.
Well, because they resented it so much and just completely rejected the idea of Sheamus beating him in 18 seconds to win the title. The worst part about that, like, yes, it's great that got Bryan Danielson over in a weird way. But the worst part about that is the lesson they took from that up until modern day, as we record this, was that the way to make baby faces is to beat them over and over and over and over and over again. That's the lesson they took from it and that they applied to everybody going forward.
Yeah, not understanding how special Bryan Danielson was, and it doesn't work with everybody, and that's not the formula for making a babyface. But yeah,
No.
definitely wrong lessons learned for that. But great to see those two guys who were never prospects, both as champions, here on the same show in 2011.
Yeah, in some ways, and obviously I'll preface this by saying, as always, that it's very weird to talk about Chris Benoit on the show, given the horrible things that he did. But in real time, that Benoit Eddie Guerrero moment at the end of WrestleMania 20 was the ultimate vindication of, true pro wrestling fans, if you want to put it that way. You kind of got, even though it wasn't the same and it wasn't on as big of a stage, you kind of got those same vibes here, just thinking about guys, CM Punk and Bryan Danielson being the two champions in this company that, as you laid out, was not built for them to be champions.
There's a famous photo from after this pay-per-view in the back where all the champions got together. So you have a picture of CM Punk with Bryan Danielson, with Cody Rhodes, Zack Ryder, with Matt Sydal and Kofi Kingston and Beth Phoenix all together as like, hey, of these 2010s, this is this is the most indie fan favorite collection. Like, this is
we're the
moment
wrestlers.
in time. Yeah, we need a moment in time photo to capture this because it's not going to last very long. And of course,
that's the key to that photo. I'm sure that photo was taken because they all realized this is a moment in time. This will fade quickly. We are the wrestlers in this weird as hell company. Let's document this before it's too late.
Booker says he's going to compete tonight. Josh tries to talk him out of it. I do not understand Josh's hatred of Booker T.
Yeah, I guess is he on the Michael Cole plan? Like, we've got the lead interviewer being extremely annoying and the lead play-by-play guy just being a complete jerk of a heel. The weird thing about this is that, like, is this a version of the classic Intercontinental title belt here? I was not prepared to see that on this show.
Yeah, Cody Rhodes, after the Oval Intercontinental title, when Cody Rhodes won it, he brought back the white old Reggie Parks style classic Intercontinental title.
The Mr. Perfect Bret Hart era Intercontinental Championship belt, as we've talked about, with the best version of that belt by far. Cole says that Booker T is washed up, which I guess that's the story. But if I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that story with a guy who physically looks washed up. Booker T looks like
phenomenal.
He looks like $1 million here, and it's not just cosmetic. He's moving. He's doing everything like Booker T. I'm not buying what they're trying to sell me about Booker T in the twilight of his career, on his last legs. It just doesn't work.
No, the Intercontinental Champion, Cody Rhodes, defending against the challenger, Booker T. Cody, with a springboard off the middle rope, kicks Booker in the head. And because of the earlier injuries, Booker loses. Still the champion, Cody Rhodes. Nothing match here.
Cody, at this point in his career, is a total zero. He is every single one of those assembly line, OVW, Florida Championship Wrestling type of guys we've talked about. His offense is one move, then a reverse chinlock, another move, and then he puts on a full Nelson, and he's like 170 pounds. Just absolutely nothing here. When you watch him, it's incredible to see the star and the wrestler that he built himself up into, betting on himself, going outside of the WWE bubble and just becoming something completely different than what he was.
And finally, a match to talk about. We've gone through a 3-hour pay-per-view. We have one match to really talk about, and it's your main event, a TLC match for the WWE Championship. The WWE title belt hanging over the ring as the WWE Champion CM Punk defends against the challengers, The Miz and Alberto Del Rio. Ricardo Rodriguez as the personal ring announcer for Alberto Del Rio. Like I mentioned, still great. Del Rio has an awesome theme song as well, perfect for his character. And then I just say, wow, we get Cult of Personality for Punk. I was expecting some overdub here, but we get the actual song.
Yeah, I had forgotten that he had this in 2011 in WWE to begin with. And then even more so, like you said, that it is still here. on this Peacock version, WWE Network version of the show. And again, like we talked about, what a difference between the entrance music, say, in the opener and what we're getting from these guys, at least two of the three here.
Yeah, CM Punk, very popular. So the crowd has its favorites, and they are very into their favorites, and they are not into anything else. And it was good to see the crowd back for CM Punk's entrance here. They were very into it. The match starts by Del Rio and The Miz double teaming Punk. Punk fights them both, but gets cut off.
We should mention also, we want ice cream chants during this heat segment on CM Punk. So the fans still remember some 6 months earlier, the pipe bomb promo where the ice creams the ice cream bars, in addition to everything else, were mentioned. Little did they know they'd get ice cream some 10 years later at the United Center, and then things would all fall apart.
Outside the ring, Del Rio holding a ladder, and Punk does a tope into the ladder, taking out Del Rio. In the ring, Punk hits his running knee to the corner, goes for the bulldog, but Miz puts on the brakes and hits a belly-to-back suplex onto a chair, sending Punk head and back first onto the chair that's actually it's actually set up in the ring. It's not laying flat or anything.
Yeah, it's set up. That chair is pretty mutilated and bent after this. I also got a chuckle out of here on this tables, ladders, and chairs, more extreme sort of WWE style show. Miz going for a version of Air Sabu off the chair. Not quite as wild or graceful as Sabu. But yeah, that back suplex onto the chair was nice. We have Miz go for the skull crushing finale on Alberto Del Rio on the ladder. Del Rio blocks it and backdrops Miz onto the ladder, propped up on the apron. This was all happening on the floor.
Yeah, fighting on the outside, Punk and Del Rio tease putting each other through the table, but ends up with a neck breaker on the floor. Punk hits Miz with a bunch of chair shots to the back. He sits Miz onto the barricade, and then Punk runs, jumps off a chair, and hits the Miz with a knee to the face, knocking Miz into the crowd.
We had another epidemic of shaky cam on these chair shots from Punk to Miz to the back. Again, just nausea-inducing. You couldn't even tell what was going on before that running knee that sent Miz into the crowd.
In the ring, Punk sets up the ladder. He's climbing. And it looks like he's going to win until Roberto Rodriguez, the ring announcer for Alberto Del Rio, he grabs Punk and handcuffs Punk to the ladder.
This was a great spot. Did not expect this at all. It was weird because, as you said, you're watching it and Punk is climbing the ladder at a relatively brisk pace, and there is nobody within camera shot. It's like, this is way too early, but what's going to happen? And then, like you said, Ricardo comes in, handcuffs him. We were also told just before this, and my mind was blown. CM Punk was a 5-time world champion in WWE by this point. Those had to be extremely not memorable title reigns. I have no recollection of him winning the title 5 times by this point.
Yeah, Punk. So he's getting beat down by Del Rio. Del Rio climbs up and Punk starts kicking the ladder, like breaking the middle part of the ladder to get the handcuffs free.
Like the struts, the part that when you unfold the ladder, the part that bends in or bends out, he just obliterates that to get out.
Miz brings a new ladder in, and Punk and Miz are on the top of that. Punk looks like he's going to superplex Miz to the floor through a table, but Del Rio runs in, kicks Punk in the face. Punk falls backward, crashes through the table on the floor.
This spot was great. The crashing dramatically, slowly off the top rope through the table on the floor. But before this, there was some weird stuff. Like Miz comes in, as you said, with the ladder, and as he's bringing in the ladder, Punk just walks by him and leaves the ring. Like that didn't go exactly as planned. Punk comes back in the ring, and then as they're fighting on the ladder, Cole is openly cheering for Miz, which is just so strange. And then Punk pulls Miz down off the ladder. And this is a direct Michael Cole quote that I have spent days trying to figure out. He says, Punk is trying to run interference. He says this as Punk pulls Miz off the ladder. How is that running interference? He's trying to stop the man from climbing the ladder to win the match.
Del Rio puts the cross arm breaker on the Miz using the ladder. Del Rio hits Punk with a chair for good measure, even though he's still laying dead in the broken table. He puts Punk's arm through the chair and puts on the cross arm breaker. Del Rio goes to climb the ladder. Punk and Miz both climb in and tip over the ladder, crotching Del Rio on the top rope. Punk and Miz are both down. Ricardo tries to climb the ladder for Del Rio.
Which I guess here on this TLC show, would that mean if he pulled it down and then handed it to Del Rio?
Handed it to Del Rio. Yeah, absolutely.
Guess that would be it.
Yep. But Punk and Miz, they pick up the ladder, dumping Rodriguez backward. He goes over the top rope to the floor, through the table, practically on his side. This looked horrifying. I had to rewind it to make sure that he didn't die.
He almost went into the crowd. So the setup here is there's the apron, there's the barricade. There's two tables set up next to each other, not stacked up on top, but two tables set up next to each other. As you said, Ricardo Rodriguez goes hurtling sideways off the top of this tall ladder. He clears the first table. Like, I think he was supposed to go through both, lower body through one, upper body through the other. He clears the near side table, almost clears the other one. Like he could have gotten sliced in half on the barricade, but instead goes shoulder first through that guardrail, like non-Mick Foley off the top of a cage. This is one of the most horrifying bumps in WWE history. Like, this is right up there with anything that we saw in the Edge, Christian, Hardy Boys, Dudley's TLC tables, ladders matches. This was horrifying. And by the way, if you follow us on social media, this is the gift for this week's show. So you can relive this or recoil in horror, whichever you prefer, over and over and over on an endless loop.
The overhead camera view was very cool, and that's something very innovative that WWE does on their production, and debuting that overhead camera for ladder matches. Everybody does it now. You take it for granted, but early on with these, very cool production.
Well, it gives you a sense of the danger and the true, just the effect of gravity that's happening on these men as they go off the ladder in a way that a hard camera shot or a ringside camera really doesn't capture.
Miz takes the cuffs that are still on CM Punk, so he's still cuffed around the wrist. The other cuff is just hanging off.
Yeah, his hands are free, but he's got one cuff on one wrist.
He takes the cuff and he handcuffs CM Punk to the middle turnbuckle. Miz is taunting him while he's standing just out of reach of the punch of CM Punk. But Punk throws a high kick and knocks the Miz out. He was far enough away for the reach of the punch, but not the kick. He's knocked out.
Spot.
Punk then
did not expect that. And I would say Bobby Fish even couldn't call shenanigans on that high kick. That was quality.
Punk starts trying to take the turnbuckle off. Miz and Del Rio start setting up ladders. And I'm shocked he did it. Punk got the turnbuckle off. And as soon as that pops off, the ring ropes collapse for the middle, and he is free again from the handcuffs.
He's frantically deconstructing this. And it's great because as you're watching it, like, you could tell this isn't gimmicked. He's really having to use his early indie ring crew experience to deconstruct this. And there's no time to waste. If something goes wrong, I don't know, they're going to have to somehow improvise on the top of that ladder. And so you can feel that urgency in a way that I feel like a lot of times in WWE matches isn't really there.
All three men are on top of two ladders. The Miz falls. Punk then switches to the other ladder, knocks Del Rio off. Miz is able to pull Punk off. Punk pulls the Miz down. He hits the GTS on the Miz. Punk then climbs the ladder, gets the belt, still WWE champion, CM Punk. Best match on the show by far. The only thing to talk about here, and just a great performance. And like I mentioned, getting to see both Daniel Bryan and CM Punk as champions as the show, as 2011 comes to an end for WWE. Good show. I mean, it left me liking this show because the main event was good, but I think if this main event was anything less, this would have been an easy thumbs down show.
Yeah, this is still a thumbs down show for me. Love the main event, but I had 2 hours and 20 minutes that was weighing on me. Felt like I was climbing a ladder with a backpack filled with bricks, trying to find a way to get to a thumbs up on this show. But yeah, Punk, biggest star on this show, came off that way. Alberto Del Rio, it's so easy to forget because his career in life has spiraled so much that there was a brief window of a couple of years where he was fantastic in WWE, yes, and he was one of the few modern WWE characters that felt to me like a guy from like mid to late 80s, early 90s WWF. Like he was a character that really just worked, and his in-ring was good enough and unique enough that it worked as well. The end of this match was weird as hell on commentary again, with Michael Cole screaming for Miz to get up and Jerry the King Lawler openly cheering for the babyface CM Punk to climb the ladder and get the belt. Just weird stuff.
Rapid fire, best and worst thing on the show.
Oh, without a doubt, it's CM Punk. It's the main event. It's Booker T's music. Worst thing on this show, there was a lot of mid-level wrestling, but by far the worst thing on this show, mid-card entrance music.
You are correct. I was going to say Teddy Long, but I'm going to revise my vote for mid-card entrance music. Terrible. Worst thing by far. So with that, we're going to wrap it up. We're going to call it a podcast. If you want to hear more of our bonus content, we do a show every single week. That's over at our Patreon, patreon.com/wrestling@random. That's the best way to support the show. If you can't support the show financially and you don't want to get all that extra bonus content, the other ways you can support the show are going to our YouTube channel, giving us a subscribe there. You can tell your wrestling fan friends about the show, show them how to subscribe to the podcast. We're available anywhere podcasts are. And make sure you interact with the show via our social medias, at WrestleAtRandom for both Twitter and Instagram, Facebook.com/wrestling@random as well. And with that, we are going to wrap it up. Adam, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, CM Punk, and almost nobody else. But like you said, at least this show ended on a positive note, because if this show had everything else and then had just a garbage main event, would have been one of the worst ones we reviewed as far as a pay-per-view. But the main event saved it to be watchable at least.
Thanks, everyone, for listening, and we'll talk to you again